Hi, welcome to another Blender beginners tutorial. Let's get started by deleting the cube. Press X after selecting it. And we're going to make a little aeroplane today, so we're going to add in a cylinder. Now, there's things you can change about the cylinder here, and the one thing I want to change is the way the ends are filled, because I want to delete them, and it's much easier to delete the triangle fan than it is to delete a single face that's made up of all the vertices. So we're going to edit mode, and as you can see all the nodes are selected on the object because the object was selected. And if we hit A, we can turn all the nodes off, and if we hit A again, we can add them. Now the first thing I'm going to do is click on the center here, and we'll delete all of those. So what we're going to delete is the vertices, which is one vertex at the center, and the same at the bottom of the cylinder. So now we've got a hollow shape, and this is going to be the body of our aircraft. It's going to be a jet aircraft, sort of a fightery type thing. So if we now go and turn on the selection limits here, which actually lets us select stuff that's not immediately visible but is behind, and hit B for box, and we select all of everything on the right hand side and delete it. So now we've got half a tube. And the reason we're doing this is so we can apply a mirror modifier. So if we go into object mode, and we'll apply a modifier that mirrors it, which means that anything we do to one side happens automatically on the other. And this is very useful when you're designing symmetrical things like aircraft, bodies, you name it. So there we go. We'll hit mirror. We need to turn on clipping, which basically means that we can't pull things through the mesh, which creates all sorts of weird shapes. And we go back into edit mode, and as you can see, anything I move on one side moves on the other, because it's just a copy that's being mirrored. Right, Control Z to get back to where we were. And the next thing we want to do is we want to make an approximation of the body shape that our plane's going to have, because of course aircraft aren't circles all the way down their cross section. In fact, most modern jet aircraft, especially fighters, they've got like a big box shaped bulge. So to do that, we're going to go and select edges, which is the little box shaped icon down in the bottom right there with an edge sticking out. And if we right click on an edge, then we can drag it around. And we're just going to play with this until we get a decent body shape. And as I say, the bottom of this is going to be the bottom, so what I'm doing is I'm making these boxes, which is where the intake would be. They're probably not going to be the final size and shape, but it gives us a basis. And when you're actually working and modelling with Blender, it's handy to have something that's actually there to play with rather than to add it later. It's a lot easier. So we've now made kind of two box shapes that go down the edge. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to create kind of a cockpit bulge at the top of the aircraft, and I'm going to do that by bringing the sides in a bit. And this is all sort of a little bit of artistic license. Don't worry about the fact that it's all angles. We'll take care of that later by applying another modifier called a Subdivision Surface, or there's lots of different ways you can do that actually, but that's what we're going to do. So that's a reasonable sort of shape. for an aircraft body in cross section. So go back into object mode, we'll go into top view, and you can see exactly what the cross section is like. And the next thing we want to do really is to rotate it, and we want to rotate it around the red axis, the x-axis, and we want to apply a 90-degree rotation, so I'll just click on it, 90, and there we go. And now we've got our aircraft's body in its normal sort of rotation. And the next thing we want to do is scale it so it's a decent length. Now we'll get to the side of it where we've actually got vertices we can play with. And it doesn't really matter which way around you do this, but I'm going to say that the left hand side of this is going to be the front and the right hand side is going to be the rear. So just hit A to select everything and scale it up just in the Y direction, which is green. And we'll make the body the right sort of proportional length for what we want. Now what we need to do is we need to chop this body about a bit to create a front and a back. So we're going to use a thing called loop, cut and slide to introduce some more geometry. As you can see, it's put a violet thing in the middle there. Now by rotating the centre mouse wheel you can get more than one, but we only want one, so we're going to click and that will change it into a yellow, and then as the name suggested you can slide it up and down, and we're going to need several of these cuts. I'm going to put one about here, which is where the back of the wings are, for example, where they will be. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to selecting vertices. I'm going to select two vertices on this loop of vertices at the end here, go into select, and then if you hit edge loop it will select the entirety of that loop. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale. S for scale, drag the mouse pointer, and as you can see that's reduced the size of the rear end of the aircraft. Now what we can do is we can make it asymmetrical by moving it up. And the top view is still, so we'll pull it down a little bit. See what that looks like. That's kind of reasonable for the end of an aircraft. How you want to make this look, of course, is entirely up to you. It's your aircraft. I'm just taking you through the steps that I would use, and I suggest you follow them because you're going to learn a bit about how to do solid object modelling in Blender. So another loop and cut. I'm going to move that to the front, and that's going to be about where the front of the wings will be. Then we want another one for the top of the cockpit area, and another one for the front of the cockpit area, now we're going to do the same sort of procedure as on the front as we did on the back. We're going to scale them down, and this really is one of the ways that you can do this. There's other ways. You can even start from a cube, but I prefer to start with the nearest object from what we've got. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move those in, because we don't want sort of an outlet-y type shape at the front. I'm eventually going to turn this into a pointed cone. That's where we're going to go with it for the moment. And the next thing we want to do is probably modify the top here with the cockpit area and move a few vertices around to try and create a sort of cockpity type bulge at the top here. And real aircraft are really quite complex three-dimensional shapes, and you can play with it and make it look like whatever the heck you want, really, just by editing one vertex at a time. And that's one of the beauties of doing it this way, because you haven't really got that many vertices to play with. You're not sort of trying to move 100 vertices individually one by one, which would be a complete non-starter. It's best to start off with a really primitive model and work your way up, than to start with something with 10,000 points on it and mess about with it. And that's true in Blender whatever you're modelling, whether it's a human head or a plane. I think I want to flatten this at the back to make it less of a bulge. And when I put the tail on, I'm going to add a piece at the top anyway, so and none of this has to be too exact, because the subdivision surface we're going to put on there is going to iron out a lot of the wrinkles and problems and inconsistencies. In fact, it might iron too many of them out, which in fact I'll show you how to combat, especially around the sort of wing areas. Anything that sticks out and hasn't got much geometry, it's just going to round off. Right, so the next thing we want to do is create an intake, and we'll shift it over to face selection here. We're going to select these faces and we're going to delete them. And there's other ways of doing this too, but I want to show you how to edit the geometry. This is important, and it's something that some tutorials don't seem to go into. Basically how to edit the actual mesh. So we've made a hole, so we want to move the front of the hole back towards the body of the aircraft so that it looks more like there's an intake there. And then what we want to do is we want to fix the hole so that we've actually got, if you like, some bodywork there. Because obviously having a hole that goes from one side of the plane to the other and goes straight through would be a bit silly. So you need something for the air to slide down to go into the intake. And the way we're going to do this, we're going to go to Edge Select mode, and we're going to select the two edges that we want to extend, and then hit E for extrude. And as you can see, what that does is it gives us like a flap. It's two faces, and we can put those wherever the heck we like. And what we're going to do is we're going to put them kind of roughly where we want them. Once again, we don't have to be absolutely 100% exact. And what we want is we want them coming down so that they join up with the vertices on the left that make the cone at the front of the aircraft. And we'll put it roughly in the right place and zoom in just to see where it is, and it's a bit too far out, so we'll go move it in again, and that's close enough for us. And then what we'll do is we'll select go back to Vertex Selection. We'll select the two vertices, one on the cone at the front of the aircraft and one on the actual front face there, and we'll hit merge. It's down here somewhere. There it is, merge. And you can merge at the first, at the last, whatever. We've merged at last. And it's just a question of repeating this process until we've repaired that hole in the mesh. And when you're doing solid modelling, you'll find yourself doing these sort of operations a fair old amount. So not everything can be solved by using Boolean operators. Some things can, but not everything. And back to point. Select the 2 points, merge at last. Now I'm going to do this another 2 times, and then after I've done that we've got to do something different, because we've actually got to create faces. And this was one rather panicked question that I had from somebody who was learning Blender a little while ago, and it was, well, I've made this model, but there's this bit at the end and there's no face there, and I don't seem to be able to find out how to add faces. Well, it's quite easy. Now, wherever possible, when you add a face, you want to make it a quad, that is to say a face with 4 points. The reason why is when you come to animate the scene, it always looks a lot better because the graphics rendering engine and everything else handles it better. It's not 100% essential. It's just better, it's just good practice to try and make everything quads if you can. Alright, last merge, there we go. Okay, so all you do to make a face is you select all of the vertices around there, so shift and right mouse button, we've selected our 4, and then hit the F key. And lo, a face appears. It's very easy. But you'd be surprised with some easy things in Blender how difficult it is to find documentation about them. F again. And there we go, that will do. And just move it all about so it looks a bit better. If you wanted to, you could drag some of the ends of those faces back inside the box. I'm not going to worry about it, but you can do that. And then that gives you even more of a sort of intake effect. That's kind of okay. I want to change these boxes though, because they're not really boxy enough for me. I had a funny feeling that would happen. So I'll make them a bit bigger, a bit like a Jaguar aircraft, which has 2 huge engine intakes, and in fact the engines themselves mounted under the wing. Kinda like that. And that will do for now. And we'll just tidy up this area a little bit. I didn't really want to do that. There you go, everyone can make mistakes. What I want to do is I want to scale the loop in front of it as well. I've just got this feeling that the whole thing should come down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the selection of hidden vertices back on again, box select. So now I've got everything. And hit S and scale it down a bit so that basically the whole thing just streamlines in and away from those intakes, and we'll modify the cockpit area again to get it back to looking more like a cockpit area. And really, a lot of the time with aircraft, the fuselage, the actual body of the plane, is the most complicated part, because they're really funny shapes. If you look at some real aircraft, you'll find out. Now what we're going to do now, we'll add our subdivision surface to see what it looks like. And there's the subdivision modifier. And you can see it's starting to look a little better and more streamlined. Turn the view up so that the view is the same as the render. Otherwise you can't really see what's going to happen. But yeah, that's starting to look reasonable. So we'll turn it off by clicking the little eye, which basically just stops it displaying. And we'll go back to editing our mesh. Now the next thing we want to do really is to add some wings to it. So we'll go back into object mode, edit mode, into face select, and we'll select the face that's going to become the wings, which is that one now. And we'll hit E for extrude and extrude out the wings. There you go. Now looking at it from the front, we can see they go down. You might not like that. You might want your wings to be straight or to go up. Just simply move the ends to however you want. I quite like that look though, which is a bit like a Harrier jump jet, so I'm going to leave it there. Go to the top view, and here you can reposition it. I mean, you can have your wings swept forward if you want to, sweep them further backwards. Entirely up to you. You can make them as wide as you like. If you want the U2 spy plane, you can have them going off the screen. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the wingtips narrower. I'm just going to scale them like that, and adjust where they come to get a good sweep back on the wings. It's kind of looking a bit MIG shaped at the moment, and you may want the wingtips to be square, or you may want them to be angled. That's up to you, and you do that just by rotating your selection. And you're already getting quite a good grasp of how all this works. Now to make the wingtips narrow, because obviously it's going to be thinner at the end than it is at the body, scale that down again. Got a fairly decent set of wings there. Now we're going to put the tail on, and I'm going to add two loop cuts here, one for the front and one for the back, because I don't want the actual tail fins to go all the way back to where the jet exhaust would be. So front somewhere about there, and the back somewhere about there. Go down to face select again, select the face to pull the tail out from. I'm going to use that one. You use whichever one you want. E to extrude, pull it out. And it's the same process as you used for the wings, really. Playing around with it until you get something that looks nice and you think looks good. I don't want the tail, however, droopy. I want it to go well up, like that, which I think is a good look. And scale the ends again. Now you can see where those little splodges appear. That just means I scaled it too far and the mesh is starting to come inside each other, so I need to back off, which is what I did. And a lot of Blender modelling is about playing around with things until you get them so they look right. Don't forget, you can always save a copy. You can always do save as and save the file as something else, so you've got something to go back to if you really screw it up. And really with Blender you should get used to saving quite a lot anyway, because especially on machines with not much memory it will crash. It's just a function of the way it is. So now you'll notice that when I want to put the vertical on the tail, I've got nowhere to put it, so I need to put in a horizontal loop cut. If I can find it, yeah, there we go. So you can see it takes a bit of playing around sometimes to get the cut to where you want it, but there we go. And let's make it there. And then it's the same thing again, switch the faces, select the faces that you want to extend for the tail, and I'm going to do this in 2 hits, and you'll see why in a moment, because I want one of these stepped tail structures. And that's E for extrude, and we'll move it. So you can see we've got that, and then I just want the rear face only, and extrude the main bulk of the tail from there. We'll scale down the end, and we'll do the same bit of tiddling around as we did before, just to get it to look good. Now, if I was modelling this properly, of course, I'd want to fill in that tailpipe area as well with something, some sort of flappy jet exhaust thing. I'll leave that to you as an exercise. If you want to do that, you do it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slim it down. I could scale, but scaling's not going to do an awful lot, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move those edges so they're closer together. Now I don't want to move them so close together that the merge limit takes over, otherwise the tail will just disappear in a puff of smoke. It's just a question of moving stuff around. Now at the front here, it's got so close together that it's very difficult to actually select. As you can see, there I selected the middle vertex and not the outside one. So whereas that didn't matter at the last one because it's given me quite a nice effect, this one I don't want that. So what I'm going to do, I'm simply going to merge the 2 vertices. So same as we did before, select the other vertex, and we're going to merge. So now we've got a single vertex there that we can move around, and it's much easier to make something that's a nice shape, like that. So, kind of a jet engine looking, kind of a jet plane looking thing. The only thing is we've got a hole at the front we want to fill in. And we're going to make this a cone eventually. So what we're going to do is going to use the same edge select as we did before. Just zoom in a bit. Select 2. Oops, wrong one. Never mind, it didn't do anything. And edge loop, that's the one we want. Now what I'm going to do, I could scale them and mess around, but I'm not. I'm going to add some more geometry, so I'm going to bring that out into an awkward looking pipe thing. And then what do we want to do? Because you can scale and mess around, but I'm not going to do that. what I'm going to do is I'm just going to merge those groups, because that's all you want to do. You want it to come down to a point, and as you can see, when you scale and mess around with it, you still end up with loads of vertices. So just hit merge at center, and there we go. You've now got a pointy nose on your aircraft. It wasn't too difficult, was it? So let's set up a camera and we'll get a decent picture of this thing. We'll have to put some materials on it and do some lighting. So I don't much like where the camera's pointed at the moment. So view, align view, and oops, I didn't want to do that actually. Align view to align active camera to view, that's the one. So that puts the camera in, pointing in the right direction roughly. Go to the top, you can see where the camera is, and we're still in edit mode, so I can't select it, so I'll have to go to object mode. There we go, and we'll move it back. Turn back our subdivision surface now. So you can see it's rounded everything, it's rounded evenly, ends the wings. Now you might like that, I don't, but you might like that, and if you're trying to make some kind of alien craft that looks organic, that's actually quite a good effect. But there are ways to stop it from doing such a drastic job of rounding on the wings, and I'll go into that in a second. For the moment, let's just get the camera lined up to where we want it. That's a reasonable sort of view of our plane. And of course, before we render it, we want to give it some sort of material. I'm not going to go into materials in any sort of huge depth here, because that will be a later tutorial. What I will do is I'll go and fix in those edge loops. Oh, sorry, fix the subdivision surface. And the way you do that, the reason it's rounded them off is there's not enough geometry there, so we need to add some more loop cuts to the wings. Pull that out towards the edge, and as you can see, it has the effect of stabilising those edges. There'll still be a little curve on there, but that's quite nice. Makes it look like you spent hours and hours and hours playing around with trying to get the right sort of curves. And the same on the tail. There's nowhere else I think that I need to tidy up like that really. Go back to camera view. For some reason it seems to have shifted, so we'll don't really want to rotate the aircraft. Set that back to 0. There's the camera I wanted. Select the camera. There we go, that's a bit better. Now we'll sort out the lighting. Now, you can use a thing called a sunlight to give you a directional light. The standard lamp that Blender puts in is a point, which is useless. I don't know why they do it. But I prefer to use spotlights because the whole lighting effect is more controllable. Now, this is Blender internal render only. You may have heard about cycles, which we'll go into later. But cycles is never simple to use, so for the moment we're going to stick on Blender internal until you've got used to everything else. And we're only doing this really so you can see what you're doing. As you can see, you can set the distance that the spotlight falls off to. Now, the one thing that I always do want to do is change the soft size, which is, you know, it's how soft the shadows are. I like my shadows fairly soft, so I'll set that to 1. up the number of samples to 3. If you're going to do a really good picture, you might want to make that about 9. And what the blend down there does is it sets how fast the spotlight actually fades off towards the edges. So we're going to select the plane, we're going to put a new material on it, and we're going to give it like a mirrory material. So let's just scroll down to where it says mirror, we'll tick that, we'll let it reflect about half of what it's on there, make it a bluey reflection, and as you can see the top there's changed to reflect what we've done. So there we go, we now have that. It'd be nice if it had something to reflect, so we're going to give it an artificial sky. We're going to set the horizon colour to something like a light blue. The zenith colour, which is what's overhead, to a darker blue. Have it black if you want, have it any colour you like. Hit blend sky, and that's what the sky would look like according to Blender. Now if we hit render image, as you can see, that's not bad. It's not bad for half an hour or so playing around. Now what we're going to do is show hide the render view, and just to prove it's reflecting, what I'll do is I'll add in a ball. So I'll add in a UV sphere, scale it down a bit and move it to where we think it's actually going to create a reflection and a shadow, just so that you can see that you do get shadows and it is reflecting. Going to add a material, it's just going to be plain black, 0 intensity, so it's a bit like a black hole, but it's a black hole with a shine, which is always quite mysterious. Turn the hardness up, render that, and there you go, you've got a shadow there on the left, and you've got a reflection in the plain body. And if you had the mirror value turned up, that would be more of a reflection. Now, I've just noticed we do have a bit of a problem here. At the front of the aircraft, we've got what looks like a hole in the mesh that we don't actually want. So if we show hide the view, zoom in on it to see what the heck's happening. Use the rear mouse, use the mouse button wheel bar to scroll back out. You can see what there is. It's where we weren't really careful enough when we merged those vertices. So what we need to do is go back into edit mode. Yeah, so what it is those vertices, they're not close enough to the center for them to merge. So we'll just pull it over until snap. There you go. And what that was, it was the merge value in the mirror operator, merge limit taking effect, so that the vertices on both sides will become one. So there we go, render image again, problem gone. Now if you want to, it's a good idea to save Blender before you do any taking in or out or anything. I'm going to show you how to save the image, so I need to save it. There we go. Now, once you've got a rendered image you like, in order to save it, you hit Save as Image down there from the Image menu, and it's always going to be a PNG. So just change the file name to what you want, and the directory to where you want to put it. I'll just put it on the desktop. Save as Image, come out of Blender. You see there I've got plain.png, which is what I saved it as. And there it is. There's an image you can bring into Photoshop or email to your friends or do whatever the heck you like with it. Well, I hope you like this tutorial, and I'll see you again in the next one.